Star Wars Episode 9 is right around the corner. At least, we think so. But according to recent developments, an ending to the quote-unquote Skywalker saga has yet to have been decided upon, which gives me, a disembodied voice whose spirit is bound to a 1930s radio, the chance to break down this final trailer piece by piece. Let's see what we can expect. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for tuning in. After the debacle of Episode 8 and its narrative choices, it's fair to admit a schism was created between the avid fans of Star Wars, those that saw the writing for what it genuinely was, flawed, and those that clung to the IP for seemingly either themes or the brand name alone. Never worry, I naively thought to myself. Episode 8 will bring this all full circle. The story will be resolved, and I'm sure the series as a whole will come out relatively undamaged. Never mind. Our much-beloved Rey is the first to grace the trailer as she dashes through the trees being chased by some of those training droids from A New Hope, the same model of droid that helped train Luke at the beginning of his story when he first discovered he had the gift of the Force, training Rey, some 3 years after she made that same discovery. Why does Rey need the training when we've already seen her overcome the big bad of the trilogy twice now? I don't know. But she runs, she jumps, she swings a lightsaber. I suppose that's all it takes these days. Meanwhile, Finn is talking too close in our ears, and it made me feel very uncomfortable. He talks about the Force and how it brought our heroes together. Because of course, Finn is the guy who knows all about how the Force works.
That's not how the Force works.
Secondly, Finn, my flawed, fragile fellow, no. Luck and happenstance brought you all together. If it was the Force, then it's been bloody slow to do so. I actually think this is the first time you lots have shared the same room. Poe then talks about how they are not alone. I'm sorry, but wasn't that depressing realization at the end of The Last Jedi the fact that you were alone? I suppose Luke's miraculous story of duping Kylo Ren and then fading out of existence was a tale to bring the universe together, and not the story of the giant superweapon obliterating billions of lives and then being defeated by a ragtag group of heroes. In other news, it's good to see that Chewie is still a character to some degree, and I hope he's actually going to do something relevant in this film. Sadly, he has to share his background cameo with the fact that Rose Tico is still alive, and not somehow suffering consequences for nearly killing everyone in the last film for asinine reasons and to steal a kiss from Finn. The Rey then takes a turn to say some lofty comments about how people think they know her.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
Now, I may be the ghost of a radio presenter who's out of his time and complex themes may go over my no longer existing head, but I can't help but think this is some kind of meta line directed towards those who are foolish enough to try and put this all-powerful, altruistic, virtuous lady in a neatly labelled box. For shame on thee.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
I completely agree with you, my dear. You are quite right. No one knows who you are, and that is the major problem with your character at this current moment in time. We don't understand your goals and aspirations aside from wanting to know who your parents are, which has been thrown away at this point. And if they try to bring it back now, well, that's just embarrassing. And you went through a weird 3-hour period in the last film wanting to save the soul of the man who killed your father figure you had known for little over a day. Aside from that, we have nothing to work with concerning who you are. No flaws beyond a seemingly random, irrational attachment to the wrong people. No sins or vices, no emotional issues of being antisocial, angry, bitter, or depressed, all of which would be understandable considering the isolation life you used to live. You seem completely in control of your massive wealth of powers. You have no quirks or ulterior motives, no attachment of love, no ambitions. I quite simply fail to understand what drives you and where you stand in terms of morality, and it leaves me rather perturbed. I'm suffering from wheel spin, so thank goodness Kylo Ren walks into the scene, and apparently thinks it's a wise idea to reverse grip his crossguard lightsaber. I'm no expert in terms of fighting, but I don't believe reverse grip is an efficient form of sword combat, especially if your weapon has a crossguard that can instantly cut through your own forearm should you angle your weapon wrong. Nevertheless, I'm sure this conflict between these two will be nail-biting, considering Rey has already beaten Kylo quite soundly at least once, with the second being a stalemate. Also remember when Kylo was almost something interesting? something impartial to the good and evil, the promise of a morally grey character who wanted to wipe the slate clean on both sides and start over. Remember when The Last Jedi actually teased something interesting with that development, before snatching it away? Well, it seems The Rise of Skywalker doubled down on having that go nowhere, and Kylo has apparently just been the big bad of the villain faction for the last 3 years. Undoubtedly, he will get a second redemption moment in this film, when we face the ultimate no-take-backsies super evil, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We then cut to what I can only assume is a comet. I'm no astrologist, but most things around this size and material are normally comets. However, whatever it is, it's apparently hardly moving, so I don't know if it can be classified as a comet. I'm not sure what this is supposed to be, and why TIE fighters are flying towards it. It seems very inefficient to set up any kind of base of operations there, but it looks cool, I guess. Papa Palpy then says some things. Why is he alive? How is he alive? Why, where, and what has he been doing this whole time? No idea. Was he resurrected and thrown into this final film to be the stand-in for Snoke because someone thought killing off the big cheese halfway through the saga before we understood anything about who he was a good idea? Almost assuredly. Will the plot have been changed by JJ to account for this change in wrinkly, crippled Sith Lord, but still make little to no logical sense? I bet my doomed soul. We then see a Star Destroyer rise out of the ground. Where is this? No idea. Why is it buried in the Earth? No idea. Why is it the OT model of Star Destroyer, and not the First Order class Star Destroyer, when one is clearly more advanced than the other? No idea. Why are there 2,000 of them in this one shot in the trailer? No idea. But it looks cool, I guess. We then see a huge array of ships on the Resistance side, all flying alarmingly close to one another, and in close proximity to one of those floating chain reaction bombs. And is that the Profundity back there from Rogue One? The ship that was decimated? Who had another one of those just lying around? And is that the Ghost from Rebels? Where the pure buggery has that been? We've had nothing in terms of world building in this saga, so I have no idea who else opposes the First Order. What factions, clans, or other outlying groups are there? Is this the New Republic forces? But I thought they were destroyed. Certainly the core worlds were, which is where you'd imagine the vast majority of their forces would be. You know, protecting the capital. Where did these forces come from? These are all clearly rebel ships, but I thought the Republic was demilitarizing. If so, wouldn't ships of this caliber, especially if they were full-class capital ships, have been decommissioned and deconstructed? Where were these ships for the Resistance this whole time? Just sitting somewhere in the outskirts of a planet not being used? And the First Order hadn't already had them destroyed? Or the Republic stripped for parts? What is going on? Oh cool, a hammerhead. We then get our heroes in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon for the first time in this saga. Let this go on record that this will be the first time these three actually have shared a conversation. Chewie is naturally the co-pilot because apparently he doesn't deserve to be the main pilot of the ship he's been helping to fly for near 40 years. Let's also mention that Rey is the pilot of the Falcon and not Poe, the apparent best pilot in the Resistance. What the hell Mary is happening? This is all backwards. Why is Rey the pilot for the Falcon, when two people in that room are far more experienced when it comes to flying, one of which has been flying the ship since we first saw it on screen? And don't attempt to inform me Rey has more experience. She literally had never flown the ship before The Force Awakens. With the exception of Finn, she is the least qualified to be sitting in that chair. We then have some shots in which things happen. Lightsaber fights and explosions, because that's the core of Star Wars apparently. We then see someone, maybe Rey, travelling across a large body of water in a janky sea vessel. Because that's the best way to travel distances in Star Wars. We then see a humongous chunk of the Death Star up close. No doubt this piece is the same one from this clip in the other trailer. Never mind the fact the Death Star was evaporated when it was destroyed. Both times. Thinking is the most efficient way to kill this. Oh hey look, a new toy. We then have this line from C-3PO.
Taking one last look, sir, at my friends.
I'm sorry, but have you spoke to Rey at this point? We can assume you have in the last 3 years, I suppose. But I don't recall a scene between you two in either of these films, so I don't get affected by the emotional impact of this when it's based on interactions I've never seen. Also, who is this? And do you know who this is? Clearly Goldboy is going to get a moment in this film and a chance to sell new toys. We've had a 3PO toy with a red arm, and now we get 3PO with red eyes. That's going to sell like hotcakes, I'm sure. It's nice to know Disney remembered he existed. I'm not going to lie, this is a pretty cool shot, and it's good to see we'll have Finn and Poe back together again. It's a relationship I've always wanted to see more of in this trilogy, and the fact we will get a little bit of it is a small relief, as their rapport, when they have been on screen together, has been great. Also, it's good to see Chewie is doing things again. Rey hugs Leia, and we need to assume they have formed some kind of relationship at this point, because aside from this scene in The Force Awakens, I don't recall them ever sharing a moment. And let's not forget, this is Leia consoling Rey, the girl she's never met, about the death of Han Solo, the man she knew for a day, and not the creature who knew Leia for over 30 years and has been Han Solo's partner in crime for even longer. I physically lack the ability to cry in frustration, but if I could, understand, dear viewer, that's what I would be doing right now. Mark Hamill returns to voice Luke Skywalker, talking about how Jedi are destined to face fear. My hope is to see Luke Skywalker return as a Force ghost, and as the character he used to be, in the hope that the reputation of Luke can be salvaged to some degree, maybe providing some guidance to Rey. Oh, my friend, I pray you come out unscathed. We then see a Y-Wing, and how tactically superior it is as a fighter bomber in comparison to these. Look, the Y-Wing can dodge incoming shots. We then see our friends riding some kind of horse creatures. Don't know why or where they are, but two things here. Why is BB-8 able to keep up? I assume that these things can move at the speed of horses at least, and at cantering speed, that would be about 30 miles per hour. How fast can this ball move? Because that's bizarre. Secondly, why do they think cavalry would be a good idea up against futuristic laser-based artillery? Remember in films when they tried that against far less sophisticated forms of long-range combat? I assume the context is that they need to get somewhere quicker than running. But then, why not commandeer a spaceship of some kind? That appears to be a Star Destroyer behind you, seemingly docked up to whatever station this is. I pray it's not in space, otherwise how are they breathing? But you could always commandeer that vessel, or at least some of the dozens of fighters that are no doubt in its hangar bay. In other news, here is the throne room from the Death Star, confirming that this is the second one. Remember, this is the thing that went... There was no trace of its presence after the explosion. Also, does this mean this is Endor, or one of its moons? If not, then how far through space did this lump of debris travel? No idea what's going on here. It looks like the inside of a rebel corvette. We then see our daring heroes riding across the surface of what might be a Star Destroyer, or some kind of star base, but the Star Destroyers are all flying. Dare I ask, how far up is this right now? And once again, why is this the OT version of Star Destroyer? I thought the First Order had newer versions of these ships, better versions, or is this a different Empire faction we've never heard of until now that just happens to have this scale and scope of the Space Navy? Also, the Star Destroyers are the old versions, but the TIE Fighters are not. We have Rey and the Emperor having a confrontation where I'm sure Rey will prevail, or Kylo will show up to help her save the day and die for it. Side note, good sir, are you operating a flying chair? I still don't know how they're going to explain how EP survived this, so I hope it's a Force vision of some kind. But then, how will they explain where all these old school Star Destroyers have come from? But if he is alive, they've made this whole journey for these two characters meaningless. Then the trailer falls over the finishing line, with Leia and Luke telling Rey, "The Force will be with you, always." I guess this means Leia passes away in this film. Do it respectfully this time. Forgive me, I don't quite know what to say, except, what happened to Star Wars? My beautiful world building, my marvelous characters, my simple yet effective plot? By any indication of this trailer, it would seem all of that is gone, yet simultaneously this trailer banks heavily on nostalgia from the OT. Star Destroyers to the Death Star, and even bloody Palpatine. This is a film that, like the saga, hints at new things, but never truly moves away from the original trilogy, riding its coattails all the way to the bank. Fortunately, it no longer looks like that method will take it all the way there. As I speak, the film is undergoing extensive reshoots, and we are weeks away from the apparent Christmas release. They had a chance to take the series in a brand new direction, to show the scope and the universe of Star Wars, the story entirely removed from what we knew, a story which could have been set alongside the OT, in a completely different corner of the universe, or something that took place after with entirely different factions, not reskins of what we had. Anyone who thought the finale to this trilogy was going to be that was fooling themselves. We have a finale that banks on the old while simultaneously rips the conclusion of said old to shreds in a vain attempt to make it appear like the end of this trilogy will be the one that matters. But I have no idea what anyone wants, and no idea what resources anyone has. They just seem to change based on who is telling the story, which I suppose comes down to the fact they didn't stick to one writer. They could have combined their efforts between a few writers for each film and took turns on who was directing which one. If you wanted my own humble opinion, I think that would have resulted in a more outgoing yet consistent plot for this trilogy. I have never been a die-hard fan of the OG Star Wars, but what I got, I liked. The stakes were clear, the plot of each episode of the trilogy was simple. The characters weren't exactly one-dimensional, but they weren't individual literature case studies into the themes and meta-narratives of the obscure. And that ultimately boils down to those who cling desperately to the idea this series is well made, wanting to see things that simply are not there, or they are willing to buy into whatever they are presented for the simple fact that it is Star Wars. Am I going to watch this? Of course I am! Because at the end of the day, it will be a damn good laugh. Will I be buying a ticket? Well... Ladies and gentlemen, it seems that's all we have time for today. I thank you very much and I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for future broadcasts.